Isn't it weird how there was once a whole genre of games that have a named protagonist, yet they don't talk because of you? Yes, you specifically. Like, I'm not talking about an RPG where you select specific dialogue choices, because technically we are talking and are supposed to use our imaginations to fill the silence. No, I'm talking about those games where we are someone pre-existing, and are supposed to live vicariously through them as if their experiences are our own. That kind of protagonist has a name. It's called, rather aptly, a silent protagonist. But more specifically, the silent part is intentional in order to make you feel like you are the character. It leans into something called player projection or blank slate design. Now, this could be for narrative reasons, budget reasons, or more often, to let players graft themselves onto the character. But think about that for a second. If this isn't our story and we don't get to speak, if we are not allowed to choose what we do or say, are we really there? And if we're not really there, do we even matter? When I think about this concept of the silent protagonist, my mind jumps straight to Valve. Half-Life and Portal didn't just break new ground in gameplay, they redefined how we experience a character without ever hearing them speak. Gordon Freeman and Chell are two of the most iconic characters in gaming, yet they never say a single word.
Do you understand what I'm saying at all? Does any of this make any sense? Just tell me, just say yes. Okay, what you're doing there is jumping. You just jumped. But never mind, say apple. Apple. Okay, you know what? That's close enough.
And yet, we're meant to become them. And again, that's the point. Valve co-founder Gabe Newell has been quoted with saying, "Gordon Freeman is silent because it is the player who does all the talking." It's not Freeman's reaction that reaches the player, it's what happens that reaches the player. You wear Freeman like he wears his glasses. Your experiences and Gordon's are always alike because you are him. And in regard to Chell, one of Valve's writers, Eric Wolpa, has said that it did not really matter what kind of person Chell was. And the fact that they never mentioned her by name is because they wanted players to feel like they had this relationship with GLaDOS, and they wanted GLaDOS to recognize them, the players. In terms of narrative, this is a very strong yet odd choice, because as someone consuming any work of fiction or even nonfiction, our anchor into the world is the protagonist. Through their eyes, we see all. The point of a protagonist is to guide us and to give us a window into the story, a lens through which to interpret their world. They carry our hopes, fears, and judgments. But when that lens is opaque and when the protagonist never speaks, never reveals their thoughts, everything shifts onto the environment and the gameplay itself. Suddenly, every creaking floorboard, every discarded note, every distant echo becomes our voice. The sterile corridors of Black Mesa or the cold test chambers of Aperture Laboratories aren't just set dressing. They're the only language we get. And because Freeman and Chell never articulate an opinion, we're forced to project ourselves into every empty space. This is something that can only happen in this medium. Imagine if there was a protagonist in a movie or a book that doesn't speak, because the intention is for us to graft ourselves onto them in the same way games like Half-Life and Portal want us to do. That'd be really weird. Video games are the only artistic medium in existence that the author can relinquish their control. In the way Valve designs their games, they are basically handing us the pen, yet they give us no words. And through that vacuum, it is supposed to fuel immersion, until you realize it also hollows out the character you're meant to care about. If the only thing we know about the protagonist is that they're silent, aren't they truly a character? Or are we just a vessel? And if they're merely a vessel, does the story lose its emotional anchor? Or does it forge a deeper one rooted in personal investment rather than an NPC's scripted arc? That tension between being the character and observing them lies at the heart of blank slate design. It asks us to consider, are we driving the narrative, or are we simply sitting behind the wheel of someone else's story?
You've proved yourself a decisive man, so I don't expect you'll have any trouble deciding what to do. If you're interested, just step into the portal and I will take that as a yes.
In the Metro series, Artyom, the player character, is a ghost. This is a world ravaged by nuclear apocalypse, where mutants roam the surface and the last scraps of humanity hide beneath the surface. Life is tough here, unforgiving, dark, but Artyom is supposed to be the shining light in the darkness. You hear others talk about him. Well, us, our past heroics in the tunnels, the weight of our decisions, but Artyom himself remains strangely muted. But what makes this silent protagonist all the stranger is that Artyom is a character who does in fact speak. In the pre-mission preamble, Artyom reads from his journal about his thoughts and feelings on the current events unfolding in the story. But that's it. As he drifts through the post-apocalyptic ruins of Russia, he is an almost spectral presence. We hear his breathing in his gas mask, his footsteps echoing down flooded corridors. This phantom-like treatment does two things at once. It reinforces the loneliness and paranoia of Metro's world. By almost erasing the protagonist, Metro simplifies the setting and the story's moral weight. It's not about Artyom's journey, it's about your journey through his world. And once again, you have to ask, in a game where the lead character barely exists on his own, are you the hero or merely the shadow chasing the light through the darkness?
There used to be 7 billion of us. We were not born for life in the tunnels. I was born to breathe fresh air, and I remember it.
If the point of an active protagonist serves as our emotional anchor to the world, then an absentee protagonist does the opposite. It roots us physically in their world. And when we are perceiving a story physically rather than emotionally, then does that open up the possibility of more visceral stories to be told? And what's more visceral than Dead Space 1 and Doom? When you don the mask of Isaac Clarke in Dead Space, you're not greeted with an internal monologue or backstory dump. You're met with the clang of your own rig suit, the hiss of your oxygen tanks, and the stench of necromorphs off screen. Now, this silent protagonist angle of the series was lost in later entries as Isaac starts talking. He mumbles to himself and even starts to crack jokes in later entries. And that changes things. Suddenly, the terror isn't just out there in the darkness. It's punctuated by Isaac's reactions. You hear his fear, his frustration, his exhaustion. That humanizes him, sure, but it also tethers you emotionally to his journey rather than letting you feel your own dread. The corridors feel similar, the silence less oppressive because there's always a voice there to remind you that he's still there. That first game's true genius was how it turned audio design into narrative. Every creak of metal wasn't just atmosphere, it was story. You weren't playing as Isaac, you were Isaac, experiencing every heartbeat and cold sweat. And when that changed, the horror became a two-way conversation instead of a descent into your own personal nightmare. Likewise, in the Doom series, Doom Guy barely utters a word. He just acts. His silence isn't about projection so much as it's about his presence. The roar of his shotgun, the slick, blood-soaked floors, they all speak for him. In this model of blank slate storytelling, the protagonist's body is our primary POV. We inhabit a vessel solely designed for visceral reaction, panic, aggression, survival. Narrative exposition is relegated to terminals, logs, and environmental detail, all in which is totally optional. This approach foregrounds gameplay as narrative. There is no time to ponder your character's feelings when the only question is, how the hell do I survive this? Or how the hell do I kill this? In doing so, Dead Space and Doom transform silence into intensity. The absence of an inner voice means there's no filter between you and the horror or carnage. You aren't watching Isaac die or seeing demons fall. You are doing it. And in that raw, unmediated experience, blank slate design reaches its most primal extreme. You are the body in motion, and the world reacts around you. A lot of these games we've discussed so far all have a common theme. They hand you an empty vessel and dare you to fill it. But the vessels aren't technically empty. They are characters. Kinda. But what if we could erase them? Take a pre-existing character and wipe away their traits in order to fill it with our own interpretation. In Minecraft, you spawn with no name, no past, not even a face, just a blank skin waiting for your imagination. The world hands you wood, stone, iron, and the ever-looming threat of evil mobs in the night. Then the world just steps back. You decide what kind of builder, miner, or warrior you'll be. Your choices write your own story in the overworld, from humble dirt huts to sprawling redstone castles. The Legend of Zelda series also pulls the same trick with their protagonist. He shows up in every game in his signature green tunic, clutching a sword and shield, but never utters a word. NPCs refer to him as the hero, the chosen one, or sometimes just that fellow, leaving his personality wide open. Each dungeon you conquer, each puzzle you solve, each princess you save becomes your legend etched in Hyrule's history. But there's a catch. This is Link, and this is Steve, but they're not Link and Steve. because in nearly every single mainline Zelda game, you can name your own character. And in Minecraft, I can change my skin to be anything I want. So the question becomes, when I do that, does he stop being Steve? Or when I change my name, does he stop being Link? Despite the different names and or faces, we are still literally doing the exact same thing. Slay the monster and save the princess. Mine for resources and slay the dragon. Link, Steve, Slurp, or this thing. Does our choice to fill in the blank slate even matter when the destiny of the character remains the same? This is the paradox of blank slate design. Your self-made identity slaps a fresh coat of paint on the same skeleton. The freedom feels real, but the underlying objectives and story beats remain fixed. So why bother customizing at all? Because the illusion of choice is itself empowering. Even if the destination is preset, the journey feels uniquely ours. Naming Link Lofus Cramwell or giving Steve a Link skin transforms every triumph into a personal victory. Each block you break, every dungeon you clear, now carries your stamp of authorship. But again, when the endpoint never changes, does our identity truly matter? Or is it simply emotional cosplay? A way to trick ourselves into caring more deeply about our goals that would feel hollow if driven by a faceless avatar. That tension between scripted destiny and self-expression lies at the core of player projection. We crave both the comfort of a clear objective and the thrill of seeing ourselves at the center of it. But what happens when all of this blank slate / silent protagonist design is directly at you? Literally, when a game questions what it means to be a character, when it treats your identity not just as a mechanic, but as the point. What happens when a game knows you are watching? The Stanley Parable takes this concept of blank slate characters one step further by turning the fourth wall into a revolving door. You begin as Stanley, but the omnipresent narrator constantly questions your obedience. Stanley did this, Stanley did that. When you defy his instructions, the game reshapes itself around your rebellion. Eventually, the narrator addresses you, the person behind the controller, blurring the lines between character and player. Every choice becomes an elaborate commentary on your agency, until you wonder whether you are guiding Stanley or Stanley is guiding you. The Stanley Parable weaponizes narrative expectation against you, and when the narrator switches from Stanley to directly addressing you, it crystallizes the tension at the heart of player projection. The protagonist is simultaneously an NPC driven by code and a mirror reflecting your own decision-making impulses. It asks, do you want to be the hero, or do you just prefer the illusion of agency? What this game reveals is that blank slate design can be more than a tool for empathy. It can be a mirror, a critique, even a challenge. By obliterating the boundary between player and character, they expose the mechanics of immersion and ask whether true agency in games is ever more than a polished illusion. And perhaps most provocatively, they suggest that when a game knows you are watching, and when it knows you know it knows, you are no longer just inhabiting a silent vessel. You are participating in a live dialogue about what it means to be seen in an interactive world.
Oh, it's ruined. I can't believe, after everything we talked about, that my story, you've destroyed my work. Why? For what? What did you get out of that? What did you think was so special about seeing the game undone, left here like so much garbage? It's worthless now.
So, do we even matter? That's been the question haunting every corner of this analysis. Across silent protagonists, blank slates, faceless avatars, and meta-commentary simulators, the answer is complicated. On one hand, games like Half-Life, Portal, Metro, Doom, and Dead Space pull us into their worlds not by speaking to us, but by letting us fill the silence. They strip away dialogue, motivation, sometimes even personality, and ask us to supply it ourselves. Whether it's Gordon Freeman's stoic silence or Isaac Clarke's panicked gasps, we are offered bodies to inhabit rather than characters to observe. That's immersion through subtraction. It works because in those moments, we aren't playing a role, we are the role. But then we look at games like Minecraft or The Legend of Zelda, games that particularly beg us to graft our identities onto their canvases. You can name the character, you can change their face, you can pretend you're somebody else entirely, and yet, no matter who you pretend to be, the mission doesn't change. The dragon still needs slaying, the princess still waits. The freedom is real, but the framework is rigid. It's your story, but only on the game's terms. Then along comes the Stanley Parable and just sets the whole damn stage on fire. It confronts the illusion, breaks the wall, and points a spotlight directly at you. It doesn't just ask if you matter, it asks, why you think you should. It dares to suggest that your sense of choice, identity, and control might be the greatest narrative trick of all. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a medium unlike any other. A space where the protagonist might be a scientist, a mute soldier, a blank cube of pixels, or just you, sitting in a chair, deciding whether or not to push W. It leaves us with stories that aren't just told, but lived. Stories that ask for more than attention. They ask for presence. And in that presence, in that silent room, the empty names, the mirrors pointed back at us, we find something strange and powerful. We might not matter to the story, but the story doesn't exist without us.